Hey, we'll get started, everybody. Thank you. This is Denise Coleman. Today is the State Technical Committee meeting. I want to welcome you all on board. Today we have a pretty packed agenda, so we're going to move quickly through, but I want to thank everyone for being on today. If you're having technical issues, please feel free to send something in the chat. And if you have questions, Tim Peters is here and he's handling kind of the emceeing of the State Technical Committee meeting. And so he is also handling the questions and will probably be asking those if you have them. So just put them in the chat and we're happy to take those comments, concerns, or questions. With that said, it's my honor to have Dean Collamer on this afternoon with the Pennsylvania 4R Alliance. We've worked with Dean for a number of years, and very excited for him to come today and speak on the 4R nutrient stewardship goals and the partnership efforts that are ongoing. So, Dean, you want to take it away?
Thanks very much, Denise. I too am pleased to be here today and tell you about Pennsylvania 4R Alliance, the organization itself, the networking that we do, the engagement that we have with all of the different players that you see on the slide here in that graphic, and also to share some of the good agronomy that we see coming out of 4R research and demonstrations, and some of which has come out from our projects and the results, and some of our deliverables from our grants that we've received thus far. As you can see here on this graphic, just a little bit more about myself before we get going with the presentation. I'm an agronomist with Growmark FS and do quite a bit of field evaluation work at Hershey in cooperation with the Milton Hershey School Farm in Hershey. And I live in Pennsylvania, or I live in Hanover, PA, and I am also the chair of the PA 4R Alliance Advisory Board, and have been involved with the organization since its inception. And as you can see in this graphic, there's quite a few players involved with nutrient stewardship in the PA 4R Alliance, which is essential to have good engagement. There's agribusinesses, conservation agencies, regulatory folks, nonprofit organizations, and implementers. That's the growers and the farmers of Pennsylvania. And here are some of the organizations who are involved with the PA 4R Alliance. I think you'll recognize the majority of the logos here. And I think part of the success of the PA 4R Alliance in its growth and development is the good cooperative relationships and engagements we're having with all of the parties who are stakeholders in the nutrient world and the production agriculture in Pennsylvania. Here's our mission, to emphasize the interconnectedness of 4Rs of the right source, rate, time, and place when you use nutrients as part of a sustainable whole farm management practice and the suite of practices that it takes to grow crops. Collaborating with state and federal agencies on policies and protocols, encourage and expand voluntary, appropriate, innovative, and science-based practices, and share those cost-effective 4R practices and information, and communicate the environmental quality successes and farm economic practices in respect of the 4R implementation. pretty straightforward. Here's one of my observations with regard to the 4Rs and my history with the stakeholders. 4Rs of the source, rate, time, and place, the right practices there is an enabler that allows us to be conversant about their use. And before we had the 4Rs, the right source, rate, time, and place, the conversation was usually really splintered with us versus them. But the 4Rs, I think that common language allows everybody to work together toward a common goal to advance nutrient stewardship and nutrient stewardship practices. Here's a graphic that kind of summarizes I think the holistic approach of using nutrients well, of the right source, rate, time, and place here in the central part of crop production, and then the societal aspects of the benefits of using nutrients wisely and well, and the environmental benefits and aspects of nutrients and respecting them, and of course the economic for the producers, for the growers, and all of those in the production ag world in crop production. It needs to be economically viable for it to go forward and meet the needs of society. Here's some of our organizational history. It started in 2012 when agribusiness joined together to start the 4R Alliance in PA. And this is where I think a cornerstone of our formation, and Denise, you guys at NRCS were instrumental in this, in starting us off on the right foot. We received a NRCS SIG grant, or Conservation Innovation Grant, for education and outreach of the 4Rs back in 2013. So 9 years ago now. That started us off, and it was due to the solid relationship that NRCS had with the PA 4R Alliance. And that was I was really grateful for that first grant to get us started. In 2017, we established a member alliance called the Mid-Atlantic 4R Association as an umbrella for the whole watershed. That we could have the Mid-Atlantic 4R Association for all of the states involved in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And then we established a good partnership with the Nature Conservancy at that time to help with the administration activities of the PA4 Alliance. And we received a nice NIFWIF grant at that time to assess the 4R use in PA. And then the 18 and 19 was the execution of that and working on that project. And since then, we've received an additional NIFWIF grant that was even larger than the one we received back here in 2017. Here's kind of the structure of Mid-Atlantic and the whole Chesapeake Bay concept. Right now, the participating states in that organization are Pennsylvania and Delaware, Maryland. Delaware, Maryland 4R Alliance is a combination of the two states. That's a single organization. But we wanted to create this Mid-Atlantic that was an umbrella organization that would allow future states who are in the Chesapeake Bay watershed to be able to come under Mid-Atlantic and to be coordinated across the whole watershed. I think that will happen perhaps at a later date, but this structure was created to try to allow that whole watershed approach of the 4R Alliance and the 4R organizations, or future 4R organizations, to come under that umbrella and have a coordinated approach. Nutrient stewardship involves lots of products and practices marketed and delivered and used by farmers, like crop planning, precision ag, the plant nutrients themselves from the commercial fertilizer and nutrients standpoint. Biologicals and others come into play because we need to remember that it's not only the nutrients themselves that we need to manage well. There are also the other crop inputs that we need that help achieve higher yield or better efficiencies that lead to improved nutrient stewardship. And I'll show you a good example of that with biologicals a little bit later. Of course, in season, we have crop monitoring, and then cover crop seed is also another key part of good crop management to try to remain or hold nutrients in place, scavenge nutrients, improve soil health, and of course be a positive contributor to nutrient stewardship. Our organization helps fund some field projects and research. I also do some nutrient work for our related at Hershey in my job with Growmark FS. Here we are at a field day a few years ago where we're reviewing the results of some of our experiments. And it's interesting that a great deal of knowledge and nutrient stewardship practice improvements can come from these sort of field experiments and then get communicated in field days such as this. Here's a really good example that I'm particularly proud of, some of our past work at Hershey, showing starter fertilizer placement and agronomic efficiency of phosphorus. Of course, phosphorus is one of the nutrients we're very much concerned with for fresh water in its capacity to lead to pollution and algal blooms. So improving phosphorus nutrition is key and super important for nutrient use and nutrient stewardship. We have three methods of application here of starter fertilizers: surface broadcast, a 2x2 band where the fertilizer is placed 2 inches beside and 2 inches below the seed, and then pop up where the fertilizer is applied in furrow but at a lower rate. Here was our increase in yield over the no starter check. This is pounds of corn, by the way, in this column. This is the amount of phosphorus that was applied in P2O5 per acre, 60 pounds, and then the pop up at a lower rate here of just 12 pounds. And then you see the agronomic efficiency over here. Look how much improvement we can get in our 2x2 band or pop-up application in the amount of yield that we can get per pound of fertilizer, looking at using this equation of yield minus the yield without any fertilizer over the pounds of fertilizer used. We increase our efficiency here several fold when we do the banding and the pop-up application as it pertains to phosphorus. So placement can strongly influence our fertilizer efficiency. And this project that we did back in 2012 really nicely illustrates how much improvement we can get in that banding effect. We need to remember that not always is it a nutrient that leads to improved nutrient stewardship and nutrient efficiency. In this case, we used a biological at planting time. It's called Ethos XB. One of the components is a bacillus amylo liquefaciens specifically. And that biological fungicide led to, this is on our y-axis here, our yield. Here's our different treatments here. This is where Ethos XB was added to our starter. And the addition of this biological gave us an additional 16.6 bushels per acre without any increase in our nutrients. Our nutrients were still the same, but with that biological fungicide, we were able to significantly increase our yield of corn here at 16.6 bushels per acre. So we need to remember the interconnectedness of nutrients, nutrient efficiency with all of the inputs, not just nutrients themselves. That we can have other inputs that can significantly impact nutrient stewardship, nutrient efficiency, and nutrient retention. Agribusiness engages with growers in a variety of ways in 4R nutrient stewardship, focused on product and practices. The overall crop management and nutrients themselves, the integration of equipment and technology adoption is a part of that. And then, of course, there's the 4Rs themselves on source, rate, time, and place specific when we implement those BMPs, trying to use the best field-tested and proven methods of nutrients, biologicals, and biostimulants that can contribute, and other inputs as well, looking at the yield and economic return, and then, of course, the environmental or society and social aspects and benefits as well. There is a dotted line or a solid line between 4Rs, 4R management and stewardship, and PA NRCS conservation programs. The next series of slides here were some of Dan Dosty's thoughts of a few years ago, and I'll just go through them. These were his perspectives. The partnering with PA4Rs and Mid-Atlantic is about this: clear and practical how-tos, innovation or new uses or more creative uses of the nutrients, the delivery of technical service, and of course conservation. And NRCS brings to the PA4R Alliance these 4 bullet items here. You folks are totally familiar with. Here we go back to the inception of the organization back to March 2012, where we were working on the NRCS 590 subcommittee that basically was the seed for the initial formation of the PA4R Alliance. And the Alliance provided those practical suggestions to improve the NRCS conservation standard that was adopted back in 2013. And that was, I think, the initial activity, action, involvement, partnership that propelled that formation of our organization. So NRCS was involved here, both in the in that initial review and revision of the 590 standard, and also that initial SIG grant that I talked about earlier. This is one of our deliverables that came out of that. We created this pocket notebook, a pocket guide that was directed at farmers, that was geared toward implementing year-round practices to the farm, where You could flip through this shirt pocket notebook at any point and find basic 4R practices, kind of mid-level 4R practices, and more advanced practices, depending on the season of the year, which was kind of an innovative way to think about implementing 4R nutrient stewardship on a calendarized base. We did it this way because a lot of farmers think seasonally, and because activities in the field are based on the seasonality and the appropriateness of the season, we organized it on a seasonal basis. And then about delivery of the 4Rs and how that happens. Some of the NRCS offices in Lebanon, York, Cumberland, Franklin have supported some of our NIFWIF funded projects to reduce nutrient losses on farms. And there is that local leadership that gets involved that helps set priorities and NRCS funding. So you see, once again, NRCS is involved with our organization. Incidentally, Mark Goodson is on our advisory board for PA4R Alliance. I know Mark is not able to join us today because he has another commitment, but I wish Mark was able to be here for today's session, but he had a conflict, so unfortunately not able to participate. And of course, there's 4R Association is more about conservation as well, which is where I think the wheelhouse of NRCS. And Denise, we've got a quote from you from a couple of years ago that it helps our partnership helps expand the delivery of technical services and financial assistance, increasing the sustainability of operations and are conserving our resources for future generations. So appreciate that quote, Denise, from a couple of years ago. Here we are, I think, again, on the principles of NRCS and organizational goals that are shared among and across the partners, including NRCS in the 4R Alliance. Challenges and opportunity, and engage in trying to address them with good science. Natural resource concerns need to be considered across all of the sciences, the coordinated action across the watershed to sustain the greatest conservation outcomes. That's what the whole watershed focus is about Chesapeake Bay. And that local leadership and engagement is critical to get those conservation outcomes. Here's an example, I think, of how NRCS and you folks participate in individual whole farm conservation, some of which is nutrient focused and nutrient stewardship focused. I see cover crops here, crop residue management, nutrient management, filtering strips, and so forth. So there's a lot of commonality with regard to nutrient stewardship, retention of nutrients, and conserving the resources that NRCS shares with the PA4R Alliance. And 84 years of partnership experience, you know, speaks volumes for the stability and the I think the principles of NRCS and its what it brings to our society and engages on nutrient stewardship. And specifically, the financial assistance part. There's the basic program aspects, the basic nutrient management, precision, improving uptake efficiency, and the super high end is adaptive management. These numbers are no longer current, but I think each of these different program areas is current. Now we move a little bit more toward the grower and the growers aspect, and talking and implementing for our practices with the grower. Eric Rosenbaum is the senior agronomist at Rose Tree Consulting. He's also the executive director of the PA4R Alliance. And here's a quote from him not too long ago. 4Rs is how we get things done. It's implementation, and it's a critical component of the in-field practices to get those practices on the ground and implemented. Practice adoption, you need to think about all of these aspects: the production costs, the efficiency, and the sustainability, and where those meet as to the application, as to the agronomic fit for that field and that farm operation. And 4R nutrient management works when you've got the conservation plan, you have the manure analysis and calibration and soil testing, and then the 4R benefit, or the nutrient stewardship benefits, with increasing manure nutrient retention, non-nutrient practices that influence nutrient use efficiency, like placement I showed you earlier, or biologicals that I showed you earlier as well. And their impact on water quality, to avoid those unnecessary applications and to control nutrient movement and off-site movement and reduce them. Manure injection is a primary area of concern for us, because we know that's one of the leaky areas of nutrients in Pennsylvania. And so manure injection is an area where we've been working lately, and I'll show you an example of the benefit in that just in a minute. Manure analysis, of course, the regulatory plans with regard to where heavy animal concentrations occur, and we need to understand the nitrogen availability in season. Because of the unpredictability of manure. We need to improve that. And there's a 4R benefit, of course, with regard to injection and retaining nutrients better. Here's some results from the Rose Tree Consulting client information of nutrient improvement that we can get with low disturbance manure injection, and we have a improvement in the phosphorus index scoring when we inject as well, to avoid nutrients in runoff, avoid that volatilization loss of nitrogen, and to help control nutrient movement so we don't get so much surface runoff exposure. And no-till, of course, is a part of that. And I know NRCS has had a long history on no-till, and no-till is definitely a component of good nutrient stewardship, especially when it comes to soil erosion. We want to avoid that erosion, and we want to control that nutrient movement so that it is not uncontrolled and occurs with a higher frequency. We want to reduce that risk. And cover cropping, of course, is involved with nutrient retention and soil health. There's the soil health beneficial aspects, the 4R aspects that pertain to nutrient use, nutrient efficiency, and then of course the corresponding water quality improvements and reduced risk to water quality. Precision ag, we can't forget about that. Precision ag is a component of improved nutrient stewardship, nutrient use efficiency to manage at the subfield level. When you think about it, the 4Rs and with our field variability, when we have the capability to do subfield management, we are implementing the right product at the right rate, at the right place and the right time when we're able to implement that subfield management. That's what precision ag is all about. And we know when we look across fields, they're not uniform. The slope is not uniform. The soil is not uniform. The nutrient level is not uniform. And being able to operate at the subfield level helps us improve that 4R nutrient stewardship. Stemming out of some of our work from grants that we've had over the past several years, we have a baseline survey of 4R practices, and we have tracked that, and that has provided some very helpful information about 4R practices that farmers are doing in the state, and that have an impact with regard to nutrient stewardship, nutrient efficiency, and ultimately water quality. We wanted to do a 4R survey because we wanted to find out what farmers are doing with regard to their level of nutrient stewardship practices, and to get those farm activities that they're doing credited in the Chesapeake Bay model, which is a constant battle, I think, as you folks may recognize from where you operate, getting the practices that Pennsylvania farmers are doing in the field as it pertains to improved nutrient stewardship and getting those credited in the Chesapeake Bay model. We also sought to improve the methodologies for verification of those 4R practices and ultimately increase the adoption of 4R practices. What have we found overall with regard to 4R practices in the Chesapeake Bay? We in PA have reduced the phosphorus loads by a lot, 2.3 million pounds per year since '85, but still have a long ways to go here. Well, not a long ways, but some distance to go here before our 2025 deadline, and also reduced load in nitrogen, but a greater distance to go toward the 2025 goal of 34 million pounds per year. Here are maps that are pertain to Chesapeake Bay. I think those were developed by the USGS people and others that identify actually where the sources are and the highest level of nutrient contribution in the watershed. There are supplemental nutrient management recognized practices as they pertain to both nitrogen and phosphorus. These are the nitrogen practices that are recognized, rate lower than land-grant university recommendation, split applications, variable rate, placement, and then timing. And the same for phosphorus. They're recognized practices on nitrogen that are based on P rather than N. Supplemental nitrogen on nutrient management and inorganic P injected, and nitrogen timing on split applications across the growing season. Back in 2016, Penn State did a farmer survey as it relates to 4R practices. This, I think, established one of the initial pieces of information that was, I think, helpful in contribution and verification and approval in the Chesapeake Bay model on practices that were actually occurring in the state. And then in our project, we did in the winter of 2018 through 2020, we did especially over in the Swatara Creek watershed area, and Penn State was involved. We did a watershed specific for our survey to determine what was occurring specifically in Swatara Creek. Part of that summary was utilized in preparation and is trying to establish the phase 3 WIP goals of those 4R practices. And ultimately here, the phase 3 WIP work group revised recommendation to increase goals of the 4Rs up to a higher acreage level because of some of the findings that we had found in the Swatara Creek watershed, and what growers are doing specifically in that watershed. And now we're working on a new NIFWIF grant that is larger than the original one. It has 5 different components to it. Barriers of the 4R adoption. This is important to try to understand what growers are perceive as things that are in the way to their adoption of higher level 4R practices. There's the 4R assessment of how growers can self-report their 4R level of nutrient stewardship. We have a split application of nitrogen underway with different focus areas. Our initial was in Adams County primarily, and I'll show you some of those interesting results. There's a manure transport exchange component to that NIFWIF grant, and then there's partnership growth for the organization itself to try to get broader, deeper engagement across the stakeholders for the 4R organization, Pennsylvania 4R organization itself. Here's what we found recently. I think this is a bit eye-opening for some folks, but anyhow, this past year we had 11 farms in Adams County, 2,400 acres, multiple participants on corn, and the enrollment was 40 to 400 acres, where they tried to implement an additional split over what they did, what they do, or what their current practice is. So we split applied nitrogen on an enrolled acres to meet the supplemental nutrient management criteria for nitrogen, provided a comparison check strip where all the nitrogen was applied up front, and then we shared that production information, which is quite positive. The average increase on those 11 farms was 17.6 bushels per acre last year on those participating acres. And that's a sizable number, and certainly a stepwise increase in nutrient stewardship and nutrient use efficiency. Here's an example of one farm. Here's our control where all the N was applied up front. Here was our split application when some of the nitrogen was applied early and the majority was applied later on as a side dress. You can see when it went on here. A little bit is in the manure history. The majority of the nitrogen went on in our control at pre-emergence time, and in the split, about half of the N was applied at pre-emergence time, and then in the side dress or split application, the other half was applied at side dress time. That's about V5, V6 stage corn. That's a little bit above knee high or about knee high. You can see our nitrogen rate was just about identical here, and you can see that the yield was improved here very greatly in this example. 34 bushel yield improvement, and the nutrient use efficiency improved a great deal here from 0.94 to 0.79 pounds of N per bushel, and 16% improvement. So very sizable. Uh-oh. My screen has frozen. Oh, here we go. And here's the economics of that application, the control versus the split. And we had an increase in revenue of 18% in the split. So tremendous economic advantage to the grower, and the improved nutrient use efficiency numbers as you saw there before. And the phosphorus impact, remember, we didn't do anything different with regard to our phosphorus here, but we do see an improved P removal or P uptake by the crop of over 8 pounds, despite the fact that we didn't modify our phosphorus management at all. But by default, we have improved phosphorus uptake and therefore better nutrient use efficiency, better uptake, less potential for P offsite movement as a consequence of our nitrogen management. So the adoption of split application increased our yield, increased our nitrogen use efficiency, and increased P removal. So to bring this all together now, the 4R focus with farmers is on products and practices that lead to better nutrient stewardship with the 4Rs: the right product, the right rate, the right time, and the right place. Sorry about that, folks. I apologize for that. And using those specifics when implementing the BMPs. Field tested and proven practices for the nutrients, biologicals, biostimulants, and the other inputs that affect yield and nutrient use efficiency. Watch the yield and economic return and respect that for the grower, because that's the grower's objective here. And then the environmental and the societal aspects of stewardship and sustainability for all of society. And that's what the 4Rs is about, and the respect and the stakeholder engagements that necessary to achieve those what people expect from agriculture, and what the environment needs from agriculture to be responsible. And remember too, the complementary inputs can impact those nutrient uptake and use, and we can't forget that not only is our 4R practices pertain to the nutrients, but they also pertain to the other inputs that are involved, that are integrated into the necessary production and the biological use of the resources that it takes to grow a crop. And for those of you who want to follow up and dig a little bit deeper, here is the 4R Mid-Atlantic website. Here is Brian Campbell, who works with us on the administrative aspects of the PA4R Alliance, who works for the Nature Conservancy. The Nature Conservancy is very generous with regard to their participation in the program, and a portion of Brian's time is devoted to PA4R Alliance and the organizational activities. Like I said before, Eric Rosenbaum is the PA4R Executive Director, and here's his email. And this is me down here, chair of the PA4R Alliance. And like I said, I work for Growmark, and here's my email address. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Denise, or whoever our moderator is, and I'll take any questions if there's any time. I think we're just about out of time, however, but if there's time for questions, I'll certainly be happy to try to field it.
Dean, thank you so much. And I think we're echoing here.
Dean, if you wouldn't mind muting your audio, I think that's coming through your end there.
Thank you so much, Dean. Dean, as he indicated, is the chair of the 4R Alliance Advisory Board, but he's also the chair of our Nutrient Management Committee here that has been a very active subcommittee for a number of years on the State Technical Committee. It has been kind of the only committee that's where we have a dedicated presence of a lot of people, and I sincerely think that that's due to a lot of Dean and Mark's leadership to make sure people are interested in the topics, and there's constant ongoing opportunities to take advantage of NIFWIF grants as well as NRCS CIG grants. So thank you so much, Dean, for your contributions. I also want to bring home the fact that NRCS released the recent SEEP2 report that has come out, and it places an emphasis on the very things that the 4R Alliance discusses. It also reiterates the importance of soil testing, the need for manure testing, the need for us to continue to expand in ways on manure injection. We're in, as I always say, the Chernobyl of nutrients in South Central PA and the Chesapeake Bay, and it's important that we examine new technologies like manure injection. We find ways to make sure that we're accounting for the manure, that we're not over applying commercial fertilizers, and so things like soil testing and manure testing are absolutely key and work hand in hand with no-till and cover crops to ensure that we have the right placement, timing, source, and as well as the rate on the landscape. And you can see that dividends pay off if producers really look and be detail oriented and use precision conservation on those fields. So with that said, thank you, Dean. Thank you very much for your insight and taking the time to walk through this. Certainly appreciate all that you have given over the years to the State Technical Committee. Moving on, today we have some partners from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and it's a pleasure to have these ladies on. We have occasion to meet periodically, and so Nicole Rinaldi and Kathleen Patnode are here to talk about some species that are near and dear to our priorities here within NRCS, as well as some national priorities with monarch butterfly. So I'll turn it over to Nicole and Kathleen.
Thanks, Denise. So I'm Nicole, and I'll start us off with an update on the bog turtle recovery efforts. You want to go to the next slide? So the species, as a background, was listed in 1997 as threatened with a 4D rule. The 4D rules established that take associated with two things: the transfer of turtles out of roads and light to moderate livestock grazing was not prohibited. So for the bog turtle update that I'm going to give you, I'll quickly introduce the recovery objective and the recovery criteria. I'll go over the recovery plan that identified 5 recovery units to target progress in meeting the recovery criteria across the northern populations range. I'll also introduce the 2019 Bog Turtle Conservation Plan that was written by MACHAC. It used up-to-date species data to prioritize conservation actions per recovery unit to work towards the species recovery. And I'll also summarize some findings from a 2021 report completed by JJ Apodaca with Tangled Bank Conservation. The 2021 report was contracted out through NRCS headquarters. The analyses in the report are specific to NRCS practices and easements in relation to bog turtle recovery. So you can go ahead. The objective of the recovery plan is to protect the northern population of the species and its habitat to the degree that will allow it to be removed from the protections of the Act. Go to the next slide. The recovery criteria basically boil down to the number of populations that should be protected throughout the recovery units, the establishment of a monitoring program, and getting a handle on the illegal collection of the species, which has been a huge problem for bog turtles, and also gaining a firm understanding of the ecology of the species to better manage habitat and mitigate threats. Go to the next slide. This up-to-date range map shows the extent of the northern population of bog turtles. The historic is the red hatched area. I added in the numbers in white that represent the population goals from the 2001 recovery plan. The plan set goals of protection of a number of viable populations and their habitat that ensures that those populations' sustainability within each recovery unit. So as you can see from the map, the 2 recovery units in Pennsylvania are the Susquehanna-Potomac, which set the goal of 50 populations protected, and the Delaware recovery unit, which set the goal of 80. Go to the next slide. A huge contributor to the first recovery criteria is the NRCS Working Lands for Wildlife, WRP, now known as the WRE program, that worked throughout the northern states to directly protect habitat for bog turtles. The Apodaca report analyzes these easements in relation to bog turtle occurrence data so NRCS can get an idea of the status of their easement programs. While the past and current efforts have focused on the northern range of the species, NRCS plans to expand their efforts to the southern range in Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Go to the next slide. The analysis from the 2021 report determined that 82 easements have been procured within 300 meters of bog turtle occurrences in 80 unique locations, which totaled over 29,000 acres. And this is throughout the northern range of the species. 70 easements are located within 300 and 2,000 meters from a bog turtle occurrence, and 307 easements are within 2 and 10 kilometers of a bog turtle occurrence. Go to the next slide. So this graph from the Apodaca report shows the number of easements in each state in each of the distance categories that I just mentioned. So as you can see from the graph, Pennsylvania is really leading the charge in easement acquisition in all the distance categories. The most important, of course, in terms of recovery of the species would be the blue one, which is the less than 300 meters from a bog turtle occurrence. Go to the next slide. This graph shows the easement distribution by recovery unit. I added the goals that I mentioned earlier from the 2001 recovery plan concerning the protection of populations of bog turtles. So while the number of easements procured and the number of populations protected can't be directly compared, you can interpret the graph in relation to these population goals to get an idea whether the states are establishing easements in appropriate proportions in each recovery unit. And so overall, you can see that the offices are moving in the right direction. Go to the next slide. So the Apodaca report also reported on the practices employed at sites with bog turtle occurrences. Many of these practices are beneficial in maintaining early successional habitat. So overall, throughout the range of the northern population of bog turtles, most practices employed in and adjacent to bog turtle habitat are practices that benefit the species. You can go to the next slide. The 2021 report also showed the number of practices and the number of easements per county, as well as the population density of bog turtles per county. And in each of the maps, the darker colors reflect higher densities of either turtles or easements or practices. So when you compare the 3 maps, it appears that the state NRCS easements and the practices are targeting the right counties with the higher numbers of bog turtle occurrences. Go to the next slide. So this slide is just my quick and dirty. This is not from the Apodaca analysis. It's just my quick and dirty analysis of the easements in Pennsylvania that were specifically acquired for bog turtles. This does not include all NRCS easements in Pennsylvania. It's just the ones that were focused on bog turtle recovery. So the easements acquired for bog turtles in PEA ends up being 58. Based on these 58, in the Susquehanna Potomac, there's 25, 15 of which directly protect all or portions of known bog turtle sites. And in the Delaware Recovery Unit, there's 31, 15 of which directly protect all or portions of known bog turtle sites. You can go to the next slide. So some big picture analyses of population trends and analyses of habitat protection for the species are actually currently underway for a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service 5-year review. The 5-year review will determine where we are in relation to the recovery objective and each criteria. This document is the Bog Turtle Conservation Plan I mentioned earlier. This and the 2021 Apodaca analysis will contribute to the 5-year review of the species. Some notable and pertinent outcomes of this plan include the ranking of core populations and metapopulations, habitat corridors, prioritized strategies to recover the species, and action plans for each recovery unit. You can go to the next slide. Some species level analyses are summarized in the 2019 report, including an estimated range reduction of 39% in the northern population segment within the past 30 years. The report also concluded that 176 out of 508 extant populations have been either partially or fully protected thus far. One of the outcomes of the 2019 conservation plan was a ranking of populations, which is what you see in this chart here, as good, fair, or poor in terms of viability of the population. The numbers that are in red are specific to Pennsylvania. So overall, you can see population rankings are tending towards poor throughout the northern range and in Pennsylvania. These population rankings, along with habitat rankings that are also found in the 2019 report, informed the prioritization for habitat protection and habitat management that's located in the report. So for future efforts, we should focus on the rankings from this report to help inform acquisitions and management actions throughout the range of the species. Go to the next slide. So to summarize the recovery efforts thus far, as I said, we're working on a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service 5-year review, but thus far, NRCS has been an essential partner in the recovery effort for bog turtles. They've showed leadership in the acquisition and easements in Pennsylvania. The easements seem to be appropriately focused in each recovery unit in Pennsylvania. The practices and the easements in Pennsylvania are appropriately focused, well, throughout the range as well, in counties with denser bog turtle populations. So next steps, a programmatic level biological opinion, which is underway between the service and NRCS, will facilitate consultation between agencies. Future easements, the 2019 Bog Turtle Conservation Plan can be used to further guide easement acquisition. And we can look to see where NRCS can help with some of the other criteria from the recovery plan. One possibility is to help facilitate the long-term monitoring of the species, which is criteria 2, by helping to facilitate communication with landowners to allow additional sites to be used for long-term monitoring. And as I mentioned, the upcoming 5-year review. You can go to the next slide. So we'll switch gears real quickly to monarchs. You're stuck with me for just a few more slides, and then while I briefly mention the status of the species, and then I'll turn it over to Kathleen. Next slide. So as many of you know, the monarch was assessed for protection under the Endangered Species Act. The December 2020 finding was that listing the monarch as an endangered or threatened species is warranted, but it's precluded by higher priority actions. So with this decision, the monarch becomes a candidate for listing under the Act, and its status will be reviewed each year until it's no longer a candidate. Candidate species don't receive any statutory protection under the Act, but the service encourages cooperative conservation efforts for the species. You can go to the next slide. When the assessment was done on the species, it was done on the whole species, not just the North American populations. And as you can see, they're known in several sites outside North America. We'll focus on the Eastern North American population, which has adaptations that make it pretty unique. It's the ancestral origin for the species along with the Western North American unit. They undergo long-distance migration, reproductive diapause, which means they halt reproduction prior to migrating south. They have larger bodies and more elongated wings than the non-migratory monarchs, and they're the population with the most individuals. Next slide. So wintering populations in Mexico are measured each December by delineating the area they're roosting in hectares. So it was estimated that 1 hectare is roughly equal to 21.1 million butterflies. So as you can see in the 96-97 year, that was a high for the population at about 380 million butterflies. And the low was in the 2013 to 14 year at roughly 14 million butterflies. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Kathy.
Thanks, Nicole. Well, as Nicole pointed out, the population data did warrant listing, and we don't have the statutory regulations, but NRCS has stepped up and is helping us do good work to protect monarchs. For those of you that aren't aware, our two agencies produced fact sheets for many at-risk pollinators, including the monarch. We will be hopefully updating those fact sheets as the status of each species changes and to incorporate new research findings that inform best management practices. For each species, one of those fact sheets targets biologists who do habitat protection and restoration work, and the other provides background information for landowners that are interested in pollinator projects on their property. In the monarch fact sheet, we go through the complex life cycle and migration that Nicole mentioned, along with the reliance upon milkweed as a host plant for their eggs and their caterpillars. We include a map for priority counties within Pennsylvania for monarch protection and habitat enhancement. And we provide recommendations on enhancing habitat, including milkweed planting densities, extensive detail on the nectar plants that are favored by adults. The list identifies the bloom period so that biologists can select seed mixes that provide nectar throughout the entire monarch life cycle. It also outlines restoration approaches for crop fields and pasture conversion to habitat, as well as enhancement for existing native habitats and long-term maintenance. Next slide, please. So we finished the fact sheets a couple years ago, and I wanted to take this opportunity to present some more recent research results into the causes of monarch declines and how we can consider the results of this research in protecting monarchs. What we see here is indirect effects related to glyphosate use. As we know, monarchs require milkweed, and the historical data shows that monarch population levels are closely related to milkweed availability, as shown in the graph on the lower left. Research conducted last year demonstrated that the monarch population decline is highly correlated with the rise in glyphosate treatment of corn and soybeans. The relationship's not due to toxicity from glyphosate. It's rather due to the indirect loss of milkweed in habitats surrounding fields. The researchers concluded that the loss of milkweed has likely peaked due to the fact that the use of glyphosate has plateaued, as you can see in the graph on the lower right. The effect on milkweed clearly indicates that efforts to increase milkweed on farms need to occur outside the drift zone for glyphosate spraying. Next slide, please. Milkweed plants produce natural toxins that monarch caterpillars can tolerate at low concentrations and which makes them unpalatable to their predators. However, their tolerance for the chemicals has an upper limit, and recently it's been found that nutrients applied to crops adjacent to milkweed can enhance the plant's production of these natural toxins. So for both nitrogen and phosphorus, the increase in these toxins resulted in decreased growth of the larvae. As fast growth is critical to achieving multiple generations of monarchs each summer, reduced growth can lead to fewer monarchs produced and a smaller population that migrates to Mexico. So as I indicated for glyphosate, habitat enhancement by planting milkweed needs to be far enough from fields to prevent fertilization by drift or runoff. Next slide, please. So moving from indirect effects to direct effects, researchers have been investigating 4 pesticide classes: neonicotinoids, organophosphates, synthetic pyrethroids, and chlorantraniliprole via 2 pathways: foliar application and seed treatments, and the potential effect that they would have on monarch eggs, larvae, and adults. Next slide, please. So for neonicotinoids, a high percentage of corn and soybean seeds are treated, and uptake by milkweed on the edge of these fields has been documented. Monarchs in toxicity testing have been shown to be sensitive to those chemicals. However, the good news is that the researchers found that buffers are modestly to highly effective at reducing monarch exposure, at least to the 2 most commonly used neonics when they're used as seed treatment. The study unfortunately did not look at the full suite of neonics, nor did it consider spray applications. So further research is needed in those areas, but buffers do have an effect for seed treatments. For the single organophosphate insecticide that was tested, the monarch eggs, larvae, and adults were less sensitive than they are to neonics, and buffers of 15 meters effectively reduced monarch exposure, as you can see in the bottom graph. Next slide, please. So CTR is an insecticide that specifically targets moths and butterflies. It's been geared towards those species that are particularly moths that are pests and cause agronomic damage. While this specificity avoids harm to other insects, it results in all monarch life stages having extreme sensitivity. As the graph from the study demonstrates, there was no reduction in exposure by buffers as large as 60 meters from fields that were treated with CTR. So based on these findings, I would say that monarch habitat creation or improvement should not be targeted toward areas where CTR is considered essential to the crops that are being grown. And similarly, the research on a synthetic pyrethroid BCF, which is also widely used, found that monarchs are extremely sensitive at exposures that can occur from drift. The buffers they tested up to 60 meters were ineffective at reducing monarch mortality. So I would class this together with CTR in that it's really not worthwhile for biologists to be trying to create habitat for monarchs in close proximity to fields where synthetic pyrethroids are being routinely used. Next slide, please. So turning from stressors that are locally influenced to climate change, which we know is everywhere, these graphs show that the extended heat in longer periods and at higher temperatures result in declining monarch numbers that make it to the wintering grounds. The effect seems to be most critical in August and late summers when the monarchs begin to migrate, but the further research is needed to evaluate why that relationship might be influential, whether the monarchs are more sensitive during migration to temperature, or whether it's just, something related to the way the study was designed. Next slide, please. So back when Fish and Wildlife Service evaluated the monarch for federal listing, they looked at the likely causes of stress to the population. And at that point in time, the indirect and direct effects of climate were considered to contribute about 25% of the decline in populations, with milkweed and nectar availability being the primary factors identified. Next slide, please. Recent research has demonstrated that spring and summer precipitation and high temperatures may be contributing as much as 85% of the stress that influences the summer monarch population. And as the summer population size determines how many monarchs migrate and overwinter, it's pretty clear that climate change is having a substantial effect on the monarch populations. So while we can't change the weather of a particular summer, we can influence the extremes to which monarchs are exposed by considering where on the landscape we create and protect habitat. We know that early blooming trees and shrubs provide spring nectar, but they also provide shade and protection from heavy rain in the summer months. Monarch caterpillars that were feeding on milkweed that are planted on the north face of a hedgerow will experience lower temperatures than those planted in full sun along a field. Similarly, adults feeding in an old field with shrubs will have more places to shelter from heavy rains than those in an open meadow. So I think what we need to take home from this recent research is that biologists working on monarch protection should be considering microhabitats in addition to landscape scale when designing habitat projects as a means of compensating for weather-related stresses. Next slide, please. And we'd like to thank you for your attention, and Nicole and I will take any questions.
Do we have any questions in the chat?
There's nothing
No
in the
questions
chat,
in the
Denise.
chat.
Okay. Thank you. That's a very interesting study and research on the monarch, particularly. Good news on some good news for us, at least in Pennsylvania, on the turtle, in that we're when we get our easements, we're hitting for the most part the right places. We just have a lot more to continue to do to stop this species decline. But for the monarch, thank you, Kathleen. That's extremely interesting. I think is going to influence some of our conservation planning decisions as it relates to planting pollinator habitat. So thank you for that. Good information. Moving on, and thank you to our 3 guest speakers today. Certainly good information. We're going to move on to our technical folks. The first one to kick off this afternoon is Tim Peters, our state conservation engineer. And Tim's going to go over a bit about the high path right now, avian influenza, and some other standards today.
Thanks, Denise. As you mentioned, Tim Peters here, and I failed to mention this in the beginning of the meeting, but for those on the call-in and for anyone interested, the presentations are available on the NRCS State Subcommittee website, and Ted will send that link out after the meeting, and you may already have it as well. But just a reminder that the presentations are available there. So I added this slide to the agenda before this week even happened, and it's been all over the news. I'm sure this group is well aware that highly pathogenic avian influenza is a big concern right now, and if there's been a positive case identified in Lancaster County. I was really wanting to highlight that NRCS has been on high alert. We were on high alert earlier in February. Actually, February 16th, we made the decision to suspend visits to poultry operations. And now realizing that some projects do require a site visit, and we are considering those on a case-by-case basis when the work would need it for the work to continue. But we always discuss those visits ahead of time, and we discuss our concerns about HPAI, and we discuss our biosecurity plans before visiting and confirm that we're meeting that landowner's expectations for biosecurity when making the visits. The main thing, though, is that we're avoiding the farms in the first place, avoiding parking on the site. We're trying to park off-site or on the edge of the operation. We're avoiding walking near any of the birds or walking near any of the manure or any of the mortality or even the ventilation that may be coming out of the building. So we're avoiding poultry as much as possible, as much as we can. And when we can't avoid, we're just taking extra precautions. And that goes to the level of even using disposable coveralls or Tyvek suits. similar to what you're probably seeing in some of the pictures on the news when you hear about HPAI, and just a lot of precautions that we're trying to take. And then also with more standard things, we're also washing vehicles after visiting, and we're washing and disinfecting boots, and we're doing that on our way in, and we're doing it on our way out. And we're even going to the level of some offices that are within the quarantine zone are going to the level of disinfecting the vehicle tires before making any sort of site visits, unrelated to poultry even, just because they're in that area where we know there have been positive cases on the poultry farms. And the same goes for any equipment that we're using on the site. The same needs to happen. We're washing equipment, that could be survey equipment or other tools, survey or soil tools that we're using. They need to be washed and disinfected. And just the main take-home point here is that we're avoiding. We're doing all we can to avoid. And this even includes backyard chickens. Even if a landowner has 2 chickens that they keep by the house in their backyard, we're still treating that the same as a larger poultry operation. We just do not want to contribute and want to do our part in minimizing the spread of HPAI across the state and across the country. And it's even impacted our training programs. We've had to redo site visits because for boot camp trainings and some of the nutrient management trainings that we work with, because the farms did have some chickens, just a small number by the house, but we're still on high alert about that. And so we've made a lot of changes and a lot of revisions to our agendas to avoid poultry altogether. I won't say any more about HPAI, but if you have any questions, about good biosecurity, please reach out to me, and I'll be happy to talk through HPAI more with you.
And we're coordinating with Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture too, right? So,
oh, absolutely, yes. We've been in close contact with PDA, and that's where a lot of what we're doing has come from. And we're not the lead on dealing with HPAI. When it's a contaminated bird, there are other agencies that take the lead on that end. If they have any need for soils information or any technical assistance, we can provide that, but we do not take the lead when there's a positive case that's been identified. That's coming through APHIS and PDA and some other federal agencies as well. The engineering staff recently, in March, completed a continuous process improvement for our emergency watershed protection program. And well, in addition to the state office engineering staff, we also had a few field office staff join us in this effort. And for those that don't know, EWP, the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, is an emergency response to emergency situations when we are able to go in and stabilize stream banks after a very large storm event, something similar to a hurricane that's passing through and just dropping a tremendous amount of rainfall in an area that's causing significant erosion. We can go in and stabilize those banks when there's a structure that's in jeopardy of being lost or damaged because of the erosion that's approaching that structure. Typically, that damage the erosion would need to be within 50 feet of the structure, so that's the situation where we can go in and protect that structure by stabilizing the stream bank. For the continuous process improvement, we had 2 moderators fly in from Texas, and they were there to support the process while we worked through it. We spent almost a full week identifying challenges and weak links in our current process, and then coming up with a plan with solutions and changes that we can make to improve the EWP program for Pennsylvania. And we're currently working through those improvements. We are working towards a new process and getting that in place, and then we're looking to ultimately complete these projects quicker and with less staff time involved. So we feel there are opportunities to make that happen, and that's what we're working towards. And we're also working on some supporting documentation for sponsors. The program is funded 75% by NRCS and provide the technical assistance, but we do, for these projects, need to have a sponsor come on board to commit to a matching 25% and then also committing to ongoing O&M if that is needed for the project after the construction is completed. And then we're also looking to develop some training material for our own people and some new documents just to help with various stages of the process. And finally, I don't have a lot of things to say today, but one big thing that I want to highlight is that I had Ted Evans, thanks Ted, appreciate the help, but he sent out an email with several standards that are out for review. So if you have an interest in commenting on any of these, please get them back to Ted and I can take a look at those comments and we will absolutely consider them. Now, some of these practices are ones that we don't use real frequently, but they are ones that we do want to maintain and will still be in the Field Office Tech Guide, and they are up for review. Along with the standards, I did send a PDF for several of the practices that included highlights that National may have made to the standard, just summarizing some of the changes that they made. You're going to find that almost everything was cosmetic. There was very little content changes to the standards, but the changes that National made would be highlighted in the PDF that is joining in the email. Not all of the practices had that PDF because some of the changes were just so minor and just wording changes and like I mentioned, not content changes, so there may not be a PDF for everyone. But the first one being air and filtration scrubbing, which would be for a device or system for reducing air contaminants and emissions. The second one is 430, our irrigation pipeline, and that would be a pipeline system for conveying water to a storage or to an irrigation system. The third one is dry hydrant, which would be a permanent pipe assembly into a water source to be used for withdrawal of water. I'm thinking of the situation where maybe a fire truck needs to pull water out of a local pond. A dry hydrant would be used in that situation, so that's the kind of thing that standard would be applying to. A sprinkler system would be an irrigation system utilizing sprinklers and nozzles under pressure, just exactly what it says, a sprinkler system. The IWM, irrigation water management, is a plan for utilizing irrigation systems for determining volumes, frequencies, application rates of an irrigation event and what we would recommend for irrigation events. The drainage water management practice is not one that we really use very often at all, but it is available if there's a need to manage drainage systems, tile drains, if there's a need to have a system where you could shut those drains off to allow the water table to be manipulated. I don't see an application for that very often, but it is available in case it's needed. The next one is roof runoff, which is collecting and controlling runoff from a roof, which would usually mean gutters or drip line drains. 570, stormwater runoff control, which is dealing with stormwater quality and quantity to minimize erosion, to reduce the amount of water leaving a site, or to improve the quality of that water leaving a site. And the thing that jumps out in this standard to me is silt fence. So for E&F controls, maybe a silt fence would apply to this standard. And then finally, amendments for treatment of ag waste, which would be whenever there's a chemical or biological additive that's added to manure to make a change to a property or for various reasons. If there's an additive that's being added to manure waste stream, that would fall under the 591. So those are the standards. Comments I'm looking to have back by May 18th. If that timeline, if you want to see something and you're running a little late, you need a couple extra days, that's fine. I'll work with you. I'm happy to accommodate that, but just let me know and definitely appreciate any comments that you may have. And that's what I have. So
Comments for Tim or questions?
check the chat.
Okay.
Nothing in the chat.
Nothing in the chat. Moving on. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. And then up next is Dan Ludwig, our state resource conservationist, who is also pitch hitting for our state soil scientist, Jerry Plowden, today. She's out in the field. So, Dan, thank you.
All right, thanks, Denise. Welcome, everybody. Kind of brief on our ecological sciences update. Biggest thing in training 2 weeks ago, we wrapped up Boot Camp 1, and we're gearing up for Boot Camp 2 next week. So we've got a lot of good things planned, and as Tim said, it's been a challenge this past week, especially with rescheduling farm site visits for that training due to HPAI, but we've conquered, and I think we've got it figured out. So as far as practice standards go, Probably at the July meeting, we'll be releasing the PA revision to the fencing standard, practice 382. Susan Perry, our grassland specialist, is working on that. And then there'll probably be a few more later in October. So, and there's going to be a bunch more coming up that National is working on that went through the Federal Register review. So 2023 looks like it's going to be a busy year on practice standard updates. So Tim and I are gearing up on that. The other thing I just wanted to bring up, and it just it just happened to be coinciding with Dean's talk today, a little bit about the nutrients on. It was kind of interesting for the monarch butterfly, the effects of nutrients on milkweed. So, and Denise also led to it as well as the release of the SEEP2 study on cropland. And so it's been a topic that we've been talking about for about the past 2 weeks. And the reason why I bring that up is, especially talking about the 4 R's and nutrient management. SEEP2 on cropland has found overall that the levels of nutrient management have been declining. So going from high level to mid-high to lower levels. So there's been this swing. And also seeing a swing in, as Denise mentioned, the incorporation of manure. So, so the amount of nutrient incorporation has declined, and it's been coupled with swings in rates, timing, and methods of application. And the biggest side effect or effect of that is, while the no-till and cover crops are doing a good job on controlling surface runoff, the study has found that there's been overall increases in subsurface nitrogen and soluble phosphorus losses. And really, our soils haven't changed, but the benefits of no-till and cover crop have also increased infiltration. So they're looking at where our good practices do have or may have some negative effects. And so essentially, these losses are can be attributed to the overall adoption of no-till and also a large swing in the change of production acres to corn and beans and fewer acres in wheat. The other interesting thing is the amount of acres that receive manure have increased substantially over time. And one of the things that the study has found that's linked to producers and operators making a switch and finding the value of the nutrients to be beneficial over it just being a waste disposal problem. We need to get our tanks emptied or that. So, and even though soil testing on cropland has increased, especially on acres receiving the manure, the increased application rates of the nutrients and the perceived nutrient availability of the manure still presents an issue. So overall, acres receiving both manure and commercial fertilizer, so this is both manure and commercial fertilizer, is almost twice the acres receiving only commercial fertilizer, and a third higher than acres receiving manure alone. Okay, so, and the other interesting thing is, although there's been a lot of soil testing, actual testing of the manure for nutrient values has not followed suit. So what they found is less than 50% of the acres receiving manure did not have the manure analyzed for nutrient content. So therefore, over 50% of the acres did not have enough information to establish proper application rates for minimizing those potential losses for accumulation of phosphorus. And basically, the study's shown that it's unknown to as why producers may apply additional commercial fertilizer, which may not be needed for crop production. And as we know, and can see that, you know, the application of additional commercial fertilizer is an added operational cost, and it also can contribute to an increase in potential losses. So, so overall, it shows that there's a need to better understand the nutrient content of manure and the availability for crop production. They say, well, why did I just go through this big long dissertation? So we, through our financial assistance programs, we are going to actually challenge our staff to really start looking and working with our producers to identify, you know, nutrient application, especially through manure. So there's been some changes in our traditional CAP program, so that would be like our CNMP or a traditional transition to organic. But this year in that transition, they added the concept of these, what they call CEMOs, or the Conservation Evaluation and Management Activities. So there's actually two that pertain to soil and manure testing. There's the SEMA 216, which is for soil health testing, and there's the SEMA 217, which is for nutrient and soil testing to come up with those strategies. So we are going to challenge our staff to see how we can increase acres, increase operators that will start doing testing and coupling that with their manure and their nutrient management. So we're challenging them, offering some prizes out there, and so we're gonna see what happens. But you know, it's something that the SEEP studies really opened our eyes to you know, the issues that we face, especially like Denise said, we're in the Chernobyl of nutrients here. And
concentration of animals and more concentration of livestock, and I think that as we concentrate livestock, we remove that livestock away from pastured animals to putting them into farmsteads where, you know, the manure goes into a tank versus being spread out like in a lot of prairie systems that we also want to promote. So there's a lot to be said to also looking at grazing to address this. We don't want to lose the inroads that we have gained through no-till and through soil health and putting cover crops on the landscape, but we do want to take it that step further and get more precision out there on doing soil and nutrient testing and manure testing. So we really want to get to that. The Monarch is another, you know, it's all in the system, and so we want to make sure that we kind of continue to focus on that. We also what the SEEP reported is nationwide we're just planting a lot of corn, doing a lot of corn. The market is up, and it's creating producers to put more corn, thus more nitrogen on the field. So things that Dean was talking about are more pertinent all the time. So better timing, placement, and rate. And Dan, with that said, as we look to this, this will be part of our long-term strategic plan as we look at the next generation for our strategic plan and nutrient runoff and nutrient leaching. So.
Absolutely. Okay, and as Denise said, I am pinch hitting for Yuri Plowden, our state soil scientist. She's out doing some wetland work today. So, you know, if I can crack a joke here, you know, we're sticking with the manure, well, not really a manure trend, but the Soil Your Undies Challenge. So, now, I'm not sure how many of you have heard about this. This is a soil health promotion. It was started by NRCS out in Oregon, but the Pennsylvania Soil Health Coalition has really picked up on this and has taken the lead in promoting this across Pennsylvania this year. They've been fortunate enough to partner with a company called The Big Favorite. They produce organic cotton undies, and they've agreed to provide underwear, cotton underwear, to the field offices to get out to the farms, and essentially what the so excited about talking about this, so I'm getting all choked up. The whole thing with the Soil Your Undies Challenge is about soil health. If we've got good soil nutrient, good biological activity, those microbes in that living system will actually break down and degrade and eat up that cotton that makes up these undies. So what farmers will do, and I think this might be on the next slide, Tim. Yeah. So essentially, they're going to be handing out underwear for farmers to bury. Essentially, you're going to bury those about 3 inches deep, and then mark them with a flag so you don't forget where your undies are. And come back in about 60 days, gently dig them up and see what you have left. If you've got good, healthy soil, if they've got an elastic waistband, that's about the only thing that should be left, except for maybe some seams where the cotton's a lot thicker. But and we're looking at collecting photos, and we're gonna link that GIS through GIS to show across the state where they are, and that'll be open for people to see where, you know, the results of it and how this challenge has been adopted across the state. So our plan is to launch here in early June. We'll have handouts in every one of our field offices, and again, as you can see today, it's a fun way to talk about soil health and how to promote it. And like I said, we are going to be tracking this, and no PII will be collected, but yeah, we'll have pictures available on the website. So stay tuned, and if you're interested in participating in the challenge, reach out to your local field office.
Very good. Thanks, Dan.
You bet.
And you're stuck with that one to talk about today. And maybe our July or October meeting, we'll see what the staff comes back with on their underwear here. So thanks, Dan. Moving on to financial programs. I don't think that Scott's on today. He has another commitment, so I know that his staff, Brian Cornelius, is on to speak today about EQIP, and then we'll move to Ashley and to Justin. So, Brian?
Good afternoon, everybody. Here, let me share my screen.
We can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. All righty. So I just wanted to touch base on a few things we have going on right now. We are in the middle of working on contracting across all of EQIP and AMA. But we have a new program this year. I know Scott has touched on it a little bit, but I just wanted to go into a little detail of what we're working on with it. But it's the CIC program, EQIP Conservation Incentive Contracts. It's supposed to be a stepping stone towards CSP from EQIP, but at this point, this year, they ended up pulling back a lot of the CSP type enhancements from this program. But EQIP CIC was authorized in the Farm Bill of 2018 to provide technical and financial assistance to producers through CIC for the implementation, adoption, management, and maintenance of incentive practices that effectively address at least one eligible priority resource concern. Last year, we were considered for EQIP CIC. However, it was ran as a pilot and only offered in 4 Western states. But we have priority resource concerns within a state identified high priority area. So for this year, our whole state is a high priority area. And our focus is going to be on climate smart agriculture, including soil health, carbon sequestration. So eventually, EQIP CIC will be a stepping stone for producers between EQIP and CSP, but not this year. who is eligible, just like regular EQIP, ag producers, landowners, non-industrial private forest landowners are eligible to apply for EQIP CIC. Eligible land includes cropland, pasture, private forest land, as well as farmstead. But socially disadvantaged beginning farmers, limited resource, and veteran farmers, everyone is eligible here. Applicants must control their own land, comply with adjusted gross income provisions, and be in compliance with HEL and wetland conservation requirements. But 5% of our EQIP allocation, which that ends up coming to a little over 1.1 million, is going to EQIP CIC this year. If for some reason we weren't able to spend it all, we are able to roll that money back into general EQIP, but I don't think we're going to have that problem if we have a good bit of applications. So here's the list of practices that were available for Pennsylvania this year. It's not a very long list, but again, it's focusing down mostly on the soil health related side of things. It's one of the big practices. It's probably going to end up being cover crops, where we have a $20,000 per year cap on that. So with this program, it requires producers to address at least one priority resource concern during the contract period. We have a contract length of 5 years and a payment limitation of $200,000. So again, high priority area is going to be the whole state. We're looking at soil quality limitations, field sediment, nutrient pathogen loss, degraded plant condition, terrestrial habitat as the main priority resource concerns across those land uses. We've had the sign up deadline of April 1st. So right now we are working on ranking those applications, and we have our obligation deadline set as August 30th at this point. I also wanted to touch base on our EQIP Cover Crop Initiative, CCI, and we finished that up. We ended up obligating 38 contracts. We were allocated $1 million. We spent all but $87 of it. So we were able to, we're going to be treating 6,809 acres across these counties here, which had a very high backlog of cover crop acres. So they ended up being our high priority counties. So we had a successful program, a lot of interest, and we're looking to see if there's potential for more funds to fund the rest of the list that we have, but time will tell. We'll see if we get a request for that. But I also wanted to touch base. Sorry. And then just a couple other updates here. May 2nd, we are having our statewide fund pool ranking deadline, and May 16th, all of our remaining EQIP applications will need to be ranked. But otherwise, before I get into questions, I wanted to touch base on CARP price spikes. So the coronavirus relief payments. So we ended up, as of the end of March, that ended ended our CARP at this point here. It's to be determined if they'll be extending this down the road, but as of now, it is over. But with that being said, it was very successful here. We still have a couple rolling in for practices that were completed before the end of March, a couple modifications rolling in at this point. But up until the end of March, we ended up having 125 CARP mods for $2,596,000. And what that breaks down to is 42 livestock pipelines, 76 roofs, 52 rock-lined outlets or waterways, and 66 trails and walkways. So a lot of good conservation got on the ground with the help of that assistance. And I'm sure a lot of it may not have gotten done without that additional help. But that is what I got, unless anybody has any questions, or if Denise wants me to elaborate on anything else.
Nothing in the chat.
Just so folks realize what's going on. So out there, across the country, the CART payments were put in because the inflation and supply chain issues have driven up the cost. If you go to your local hardware store, you can see that the cost of lumber is high, the cost of steel is high, the cost of aggregate is high. The cost of trying to get a contractor is hard, and it's high. So want to thank Ryan and Scott a lot because they've processed a lot of those contracts that probably wouldn't have happened. That was money that was obligated and tied up and probably would have been canceled or terminated due to economic hardship. So when you look at those CART payments, you need to look at that. That was a savings of 125 contracts that probably would not have happened. And generally speaking, that's probably some of the average costs on those contracts, about $180,000 contract, $150,000 contract. And when that's tied to it, if you're looking at roofs and covers and you're looking at the underground outlets and all that kind of thing, and animal trails and walkways that were the practices, you're looking at a farmstead system that's being put in. And so even though you don't have, on paper, Brian's reporting that he's probably saving a roof, he's probably saving an ag waste storage, so we're getting better nutrient timing. He's probably saving some access roads that are improving because we're putting in the whole farmstead. Those covered heavy use areas would not have probably happened, and the entire contract would have probably dissolved if producers didn't get a little bit extra compensation. And RCS doesn't often do that. And as you can see, they still haven't extended it for March 31st. When a producer signs a contract with us, they're doing it as a leap of faith that those practices are not going to increase tremendously. So with those practices, many of them were, those producers locked into 2019, 2018 prices, and it was a lot. So, and the increase was significant. And so when we look at producers and when we look at conservation on the ground, we need to be cognizant that the farm community is really taking a hit right now in the increase in the fuel costs, in the increase in construction costs. And as policymakers and decision makers, it's important for us to realize that there may be a situation that we need to supplement some of these contracts to make up for these supply chain and just inflation issues and fuel change issues. So with that, I said enough on that end. But I think when we throw acronyms out, it's hard for people to realize what's really going on in the landscape, and that's what's happening. Moving on to Ashley's up. She's going to talk a little bit about the National Water Quality Initiative, the Conservation Stewardship Program, and then the Conservation Innovation Grants, which closed, our deadline for applications was April 14th. So excited to get those applications in. So Ashley?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll assume you can see my screen and hear me. So I will talk about this. You don't?
Yeah, Ashley, you might we don't see the screen yet. Does anybody else see the screen?
Okay, hang on a minute. Can you see it now?
I can share from my end, Ashley, if that works for you. Does that
That's
work for
okay.
you?
Yep,
Oh, others can see it.
Can others
I
see it?
stopped sharing.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll share.
we
Let's see
can,
if
we
that-
can see it. Maybe it's just NRCS.
Oh,
It
here, well, I'll try.
probably is.
All right, it says I'm presenting again, so I think I'll just go ahead and move forward. Okay, there we go. So as Denise said, I will talk about conservation innovation grants, specifically our last notice of funding opportunity for this fiscal year, conservation stewardship program, preparing for our CSP Classic opportunity, and then EQIP National Water Quality Initiative share a success story. For the 2022 conservation innovation grants, we did have a notice of funding opportunity out, and it closed at 11:59 on April 14th. I have received 7 applicants for that, and I think a few of them are not really viable, but the rest will be reviewing pretty shortly moving forward. Our priorities for this year were soil health, water quality, urban farming, non-industrial private forest land, carbon sequestration, and legacy sediment. So we're looking forward to working in some of those areas with our partners. Moving on to Conservation Stewardship Program, I've been working on preparations for our CSP Classic sign up. You might remember we have multiple iterations of CSP that we do throughout the year. So we had a grassland conservation initiative, and we had our CSP renewals. And this summer we'll be doing our CSP Classic, or our original conservation stewardship program. So I'm working on the getting the Pennsylvania activity list put out, as well as the job sheets, and then developing our rankings and some additional training and guidance in the coming months. Moving on to the National Water Quality Initiative. That's, as I said, under our larger program, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And I like to always show the 5 watersheds that we have in our state that we're working with. Swatara and Maiden being our source water protection pilots. And then to show the map that shows where all of those are located. And you have this presentation as well that you can access. Our rankings for the Environmental Quality Incentives Program are out, including the NWQI ranking. This slide just shows that we give additional credit for resource concern affecting water quality, or if a resource concern is affecting water quality within 100 feet, and it will be addressed through the application. So we have a decreasing scale there, 100, 200, 300 feet away from water, where you get points. And then this is the same ranking we use for all 5 of our watersheds, but money is set aside for each of those 5. So they're not exactly competing against each other for the same funds. So you'll see the next question actually only pertains to those source water protection areas, and those have zones of protection, so they get more points if they're in a more critical, or I'm sorry, a closer zone of protection to protect source water, which is where we get our drinking water from. And then later on the ranking, we give additional credit if we're intersecting a critical source area layer. That's something that's part of each watershed's watershed assessment plan. They've identified the critical sources for pollution. So if they're on that map layer, then they get additional points for doing work to correct those pollution areas. Regarding our funding for NWQI, in 2020, we were able to fund 33 contracts for $3.7 million. In 2021, we funded 14 for $1.3 million. And last year, we had around $885,000 allocated to us, and we requested more. And this year, we sort of saw the same thing, where we got a little lower amount of money than we were expecting, and we do have a request in for additional $2 million. So our original request from the watershed budgets across those 5 areas was $3 million. We requested an additional $2 million in March to fund the applications we have for those watersheds. We haven't heard yet to date whether we're receiving that or not, but we will work with what we have, and we're always trying to request more, because we think I think our work in these watersheds is very important to take these ag impaired streams and have them no longer be ag impaired. That's our end goal. So we're trying to reduce the sediments and nutrients that are part of ag impaired watersheds. And right now we have 22 NWQI applications in the state. So that's what we're working with for those. I just wanted to share, I believe Ted Evans sent this out to you previously, but as we have successes along the way on our journey to success on these NWQI watersheds, we're trying to put out some sheets to show what's going on. So the first one we did was the Swatara Creek watershed to show the reductions in turbidity. And I think you've already seen that, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking on that, but they had a 13% decrease. So that was to show that. And then they were also highlighted in our annual accomplishments report for this year, the PA NRCS annual accomplishments report with an article. So I'm just showing that there as well. And I doubt we have much time for questions, but I am available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Nothing in the chat.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Moving on, Justin Atkins with RCPP, and Justin's acting. Justin's normal role is a district conservationist in Franklin County, and he has stepped up to help us in our time of need to manage the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. So certainly appreciate Justin's good work on this program. So moving forward, Justin, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Denise. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Can you see my screen, Tim?
Yeah, I see it. Thanks, Justin.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks. Yes, I'm Justin Atkins, acting RCPP coordinator here for Pennsylvania. Just to get started today, what is RCPP? So the goal of this program is to seek to get conservation on the ground by coordinating with different partners that offer innovative practices or solutions to get address resource concerns on the landscape. And NRCS is able to take advantage of any type of value-added contributions that partners that we work with through the program. RCPP in Pennsylvania, we have two different types that we're working with, many types, but in the 2014 Farm Bill, RCPP was actually attached to EQIP, and we still have two projects that are active here in Pennsylvania that we're taking applications for this year, and that's the Implementing Conservation Practices and CNMPs on Pennsylvania Preserved Farms through the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture partner that we're working with, and also the Chester County Conservation District Partnership for Chesapeake Bay and water quality. In 2018, the RCPP program became a standalone program, and we have quite a few Farm Bill projects that we're working on through that program. It would be the Kittatinny Ridge Conservation Landscape Project that has your normal type of land management projects, like general kind of works like a EQIP contract. And then we also have a entity held easement based portion of that. It's a easement program. We have an ag BMP implementation in the Chesapeake Bay project that is specific to Berks County, which is a land management based project. We have a project, Buffalo Creek Watershed Conservation Alliance, that is in Butler and Armstrong counties, and that has a land management portion and a easement portion. Lancaster Common Agenda for Clean Water is another project in Pennsylvania that is specific to Lancaster County and trying to address nutrient reductions in specific high priority and medium priority areas within the county. There we have a Turkey Hill Clean Water Partnership project that spans different portions of the southeast and the northeast and even the west. So that project covers a vast area, and that's land management based as well. Our state is also working through a proposal that was approved in 2021 that is a alternative funding arrangement, and that project is still under negotiation at this time. As far as kind of getting to some of the things that Ryan covers, the RCPP program, we aligned our land management ranking deadlines and screening deadlines to match up with EQIP. So our screening deadline was April 15th. Our ranking deadline is May 16th, and obligation deadline of August 30th on the land management contracts. So as far as what was accomplished last year through our land management contracts for the RCPP 2018 Farm Bill agreements, we had a total of 5 contracts for the Buffalo Creek project in Butler and Armstrong counties, totaling $77,104. And then we also had 5 contracts under the Berks County agreement, totaling $897,370. As far as RCPP for this fiscal year in 2022, we recently had a proposal deadline of April 13th, and we have received a total of 2 proposals to evaluate and review, and we have just started that process. Some other important information to review here would be the core principles of RCPP. So those 4 are impact, partner contributions, innovation, and partnership and management. Impact would refer more to proposing effective solutions that address resource concerns. Partner contributions would refer to contributions from a partner that can be a combination of cash or in-kind services, and what we try to shoot for with RCPP is a 1-to-1 match or greater from the partner. That really any amount that they can leverage really improves their standing with the proposal or improves their ranking in the evaluation. We're also looking for innovation on these projects that integrate multiple approaches and looking for just new techniques and technology. And then the partnership and management, we're looking for partners that have the capabilities and experience and expertise to manage these projects. Something else that's important to mention would be CCA versus state or multi-state proposals. What CCA means is critical conservation areas. So there are 8 CCA areas throughout the U.S., and we're in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which is one of those 8. And the CCA portion gets half of the RCPP funding, per year there, and the state multi-state would get the other half. So participants that would compete in CCA in the CTA funds would actually have a lot, less competitive pool there to compete against. Some resources that we have online. There's a national web page for RCPP that you could go to just gather general background about the program and what the requirements are as far as producer eligibility, land eligibility. Gives you a general overview. And then Pennsylvania, we have our own web page that lists out the 2014 Farm Bill projects and the 2018 Farm Bill projects, and you can find the sign-up periods, application forms, just general information about the projects that we have specific to Pennsylvania here in this state. But I just gave a general overview, and if anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
No questions in the chat, Justin.
Hey, thank you, Justin, and thanks for serving in this capacity. We certainly appreciate it. And last but not
Yep,
least,
thank you.
I accidentally missed him. Sorry. Adam Dellinger, who also served as acting RCPP coordinator and now helping us out as acting easement program manager for a period of time. And want to thank Adam for his good work, and he's going to give a little bit of an overview on ASAP. Adam?
Great. Thanks so much, Denise. Good afternoon, everyone. If folks can't see my screen, please let me know, but I'll just push forward. As Denise said, my name is Adam Dellinger. I'm the acting easement program manager for Pennsylvania NRCS currently, and just wanted to take this opportunity to give a real quick update on things that are happening with easements and PA NRCS. So let's just start with our farmland preservation programs. So for regular ASAP,
Adam,
ALE. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Adam, we're still not seeing it. Is anybody else seeing it? Could be us.
Just came up, Denise. Yes, I see
Okay,
it.
just see it. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay,
Just
thanks. Yeah, so for our regular ASAP ALE program, agricultural land easements, for fiscal year 22, we were allocated $1.1 million. We've had 2 application cutoff dates to point. The second cutoff date was March 1st. So far, we've received 7 applications for a request of around $735,000 of NRCS funding. If funded, these applications would represent about 525 acres of farmland preserved. And we're currently ranking projects until funding runs out based on when the application was submitted, how much funding remains, and how many applications in total are received. We're also working with partners on 3 RCPP projects for farmland preservation. As you heard, this will sound a little bit familiar based on the introduction that Justin provided on RCPP. He did hit on 3 projects that we are working with for entity-held easements for farmland preservation. So the first one I wanted to touch on was the one called Implementing Conservation Practices and CNMPs on Pennsylvania Preserved Farms. So as Justin said, this is an older RCPP project funded under the 2014 Farm Bill. PDA is our lead partner with this project, and the project area covers South Central PA. So we have Franklin and Adams, York, Cumberland, Perry, and Dauphin counties. We are currently working through processing 3 applications through this program that, if funded, would preserve 524 acres of farmland. Moving on to the next RCPP project, we have Kittatinny Ridge Conservation Landscape. Again, PDA is the lead partner on this project. The area that we're working here is the Kittatinny Ridge landscape in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. The application cutoff dates for this year have passed, and we're currently working on processing 5 applications that would preserve 621 acres if they're all funded. And the last RCPP project with farmland preservation component is the Buffalo Creek Watershed Conservation Alliance, RCPP. Audubon Society of Western Pennsylvania is the lead partner with this project, and that's it. We're actively accepting applications now. The funding announcement was just posted this week, and the application deadline is May 31st of 22. And easement applications will be accepted from farms that are located within the boundaries of the Buffalo Creek watershed in Armstrong County. Now, moving on to our wetland easement program, also known as WRE. For fiscal year 22, PA NRCS was allocated a little over $500,000 for this program. March 1 was our application cutoff date, and we're working on evaluating 6 new applications for WRE. A team of state office staff recently followed up on 1 application by conducting a site visit to take an initial look at things like site hydrology and the soils to get a solid understanding of the restoration potential of that site. And this is a really important first step that we take with all these applications, as it helps us get a better understanding of whether the site will be a good match for the program. The same team will be visiting remaining applicant sites in May and June as we work through that application review process. And the last easement type to talk about today is our Healthy Forests Reserve Program. So if you're not familiar with this program, this is a program that assists landowners with restoration and protection of private forest land. And in Pennsylvania, HFRP funding is utilized to protect and improve critical habitat for the Indiana bat, which is a federally protected endangered species. We're working processing 2 applications for this program. And again, sort of similar to WRE, we have state office staff scheduled to visit these sites in early May to take a look at eligibility and site suitability for this program. And the last thing I wanted to hit on with monitoring today is just a little bit about our monitoring. So each time the agency closes on an easement in RCS, we accept some level of responsibility to monitor that easement and make sure the terms and conditions of the easement are being upheld. So depending on that easement type, we may rely on partners to be our eyes and ears on the ground, or sometimes NRCS employees do this work themselves. For this year, PA staff are responsible for on-site and off-site monitoring of 264 easements. So far, a little bit over 100 reports have been submitted. And also by the end of this year, we'll review and record 480 easement monitoring reports from our farmland preservation easement partners. So that's all I have for our quick update on easements. Here's my contact info. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Any questions for Adam?
No questions.
Thanks, Adam. We're getting closer to 1,000 easements acquired by NRCS, so it's a real milestone, but and had a nice opportunity to be part of a celebration at the board meeting of PDA and all the good work that they're doing preserving farmland. So I want to thank our partners for that. Moving on, we have no other comments in the chat. Do we have anything that we want to, anybody have any comments or concerns? Or if now you can speak up for questions. Okay, going once, twice, 3 times. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for participating today. We appreciate it. The next State Technical Committee is July 19th. And we appreciate our guest speakers when they come on. Big thanks to Dean, Nicole, and Kathleen today. Certainly appreciate their insights and their findings that are happening with all this conservation that gets put on the ground. We like to see what the outcomes are, so I can't thank them enough for making time for that. And please, if you have any requests for speakers, or you'd like to speak, or you'd like to be part of something, please feel free to contact Susan Marquardt. We'll put her name in the chat just so we have it. But Susan is, well, we couldn't function without Susan. She does a great job organizing and making sure that these meetings go off with interesting comments and discussions. So again, Susan Marquardt is our point of contact on that. As a final note, just to let you know what's going on, generally we have Hathaway Jones, who's our easement manager and coordinator. She is on assignment to work on the writing of the next 5-year strategic plan. So many of the topics that we discussed today will be incorporated into that 5-year plan. We're also going out to stakeholders in the next upcoming few months. We have a contract to go out and interview stakeholders with about 5 or 6 focus group stakeholder meetings to get input and insight on priorities and issues in Pennsylvania that we should coordinate and put into our next strategic plan. That becomes very important because that kind of sets the stage for the next farm bill for us. And so there's a lot of groups, a lot of people always say, well, can you think about this particular watershed, or can you think about this particular species of concern, or those kinds of things. Generally speaking, we try and we have a lot of demands of a lot of people looking at opportunities to use Farm Bill programs across the state. And so we take this opportunity with the strategic plan to go in and get not only kind of a course, set the direction for where we're going to go in the next 5 years on land uses across the state, whether it be forestry, pasture, cropland, or farmstead use, but also we look also to target and set priority areas. Based on that, we kind of we make an effort to kind of do things for the long haul, not kind of flash in the pan, but we try and at least have a strategic approach and all that, those kinds of things. So please, if you see something that's coming through, either from Hathaway or upcoming with NRCS strategic plan from one of the consultants, please participate. We'd like your input, your thoughts, and we'd like to know where you think our future direction should be. So thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for participating today, and we'll see you in July.